Welcome to Gene's Reviews, where I basically do whatever the hell I want. Hello everybody, you saw my intro, you know who I am. I hope you all had a great Christmas. It's now December 26th, and I'm going to do a video from Most Amazing Elite. This is evil scientists who experimented on humans. Them naughty scientists. Let's check this out.
In our number 10 spot, we have Johann Conrad Dippel. Dippel was a scientist that is known for creating the elixir of life, an elixir that, yes, would keep you living for as long as you would like. It was called Dippel's oil.
I wouldn't want that.
He tried to trade the elixir for Frankenstein's castle once. Obviously, the owners didn't fall for it, or at least they didn't believe in its worth. But I bet you're wondering, why was he thought to be so evil? Well, probably because he used to experiment on himself and dead bodies. And he claimed that he even transferred the soul of one body to another, even though no one could ever confirm this, as the bodies were, well, deceased.
Yeah, how do you know?
He also claimed to have a way of releasing demons from bodies. Man, I wonder if that's documented anywhere. We can all use an exercise for releasing demons, you know what I mean?
Number 9. Wholphin. These guys were created when a female common bottlenose dolphin was bred with a male false killer whale. Yeah, we shouldn't be doing this. They're extremely rare and they have been found.
Well, that's
wild,
not a human,
unfortunately,
but
most of the ones that have existed were bred in captivity, because humans are the worst. The first recorded wholphin was born in the Tokyo SeaWorld in 1981.
That's
and he very
messed up.
sadly died just 200 days later. Didn't even make it 1 year. Horrible. Probably a prime example of why they maybe shouldn't exist in the first place. I don't know, just a wild observation. The first that was born in the United States that actually somehow survived was at Sea Life Park in Hawaii in May 1985, and her name was Kekamalu. She ended up having 3 babies. The first passed away after a few days, the second passed away at the age of 9, but thankfully the third one is still alive. In March last year, both Kekamalu and her daughter were still alive, but they remain, of course, in captivity. So it's like, great, but really not at the same time.
In our number 8 spot,
they're basically just making money off it.
Tuskegee scientists. The scientists that participated in this experiment are legit pure evil. There was a study done called the Tuskegee study.
I think
where
it's pronounced
600
Tuskegee.
African-American males, 399 who were suffering with syphilis, and 201 who weren't. And these men were being tricked into thinking that they were being treated for the illness, when really, they were dying off, except the ones that didn't have it, of course. They were the success stories, of course. But what was the purpose of this? Well, to study their corpses. They couldn't have thought to just ask them if they could study their bodies once they die. Why did this happen, and even for as long as it did, which was 40 years?
That's
from
terrible.
1932 to 1972.
Wow.
So evil. Reparations were eventually paid to the victims of the study, but
I can't
nothing could
believe
make up
they
for
were
the horrible feeling they must have
doing
felt
that
from
even in
going
the
through that
70s.
experience. In our number 7 spot, we have Dr. Sigmund Rascher. This is a scientist that needed to be mentioned because of how evil he was. However, it is unclear as to whether he experimented on himself at all throughout his life. Rascher is considered one of the most evil scientists in the world from World War II. He worked at a camp and apparently experimented on 300 unwilling people in high altitude freezing experiments. Victims were locked in a pressure chamber where the altitude was being continuously adjusted, and they would feel as if they were falling out of a plane. He would also place them in freezing environments naked to perform tests. Of course, this led to many deaths. He was asked to do this on monkeys, but demanded humans. Clearly a very sick and awful man. In our number 6 spot, we have Shiro Ishii. There is a man that is known as Surgeon General Shiro Ishii, and he was a scientist and medical officer for the Japanese Imperial Army. In fact, he led the biological warfare unit that is known as 731. He's also known for being just plain evil, as he would experiment on Chinese prisoners and regular civilians. He used biological weapons that is said to have caused tens of thousands of deaths, including the bubonic plague, cholera, and anthrax.
Wow.
He would also conduct other evil experiments on his patients, including forced and simulated hypothermia. It is unclear if he experimented on himself, as I'm sure he wouldn't have given himself the bubonic plague.
I'm sure he wouldn't
but
have.
It
He
is
probably
clear
didn't.
that he was very, very evil. In our number 5 spot, we have Max Joseph von Pettenkofer. Max was a scientist that wasn't so much evil as he was seemingly insane, as he did an extremely risky experiment on himself. Apparently, in 1892, he wanted to disprove the theory that cholera bacteria alone was the cause of the disease. In the presence of witnesses, Max swallowed some broth with a large dose of cholera bacteria. He apparently also consumed some sodium bicarbonate to neutralize the acids in his stomach after it was suggested that the acid could kill the bacteria. Apparently, he suffered only minor symptoms, and what he did experience, he says, wasn't due to the bacteria. To me,
Wow,
he just
that's
sounds like
dedication
he was either a little insane
do it
or
yourself.
just so sure of himself that it wasn't a risk at all. And even then, I would say to be that sure of yourself, to take that big of a risk, means you have to be a little insane.
A little bit,
In our number
just a
2
little.
spot, we have Peter Neubauer. In the 60s and 70s, a secret experiment was done, led by a scientist by the name of Peter Neubauer, that separated twins and triplets from each other, and they were adopted as singles. Apparently,
Why
this
would you do
experiment
that?
was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, and the purpose of this experiment is still unclear. To separate living humans from their family, all for the sake of science, is truly just evil in my opinion. The experiment was discovered in the 80s after 3 identical brothers accidentally found each other. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like to be them. I suppose this experiment isn't as horrible as some of the other ones we have listed today.
Pretty
but
bad, though.
It
I mean,
still is terribly sad to think about all of these people, missing out on growing up with their brothers
Yeah.
and sisters. It is unclear whether Peter's decision to lead this was part of his job and therefore through slight force, as it was being funded by a big organization, or whether he pushed for this to be done. In our number
I'm glad
1
they
spot,
found
we
each
have
other.
10 spot, we have Vladimir Demikov. Vladimir is a scientist from the Soviet Union that tried to create a 2-headed dog. Not making this up. Not in the regular crossbreeding way that you may assume. He literally amputated the body of one of the dogs and attached it to the other. This honestly makes me sick to talk about. The dogs only lasted 4 days before passing away, and guess what? He did it again. He did it again. The next experiment ended up with 2 dogs living for about a month. But guess what? He literally had no purpose for these experiments.
God.
Just the ego
I love dogs
satisfaction
so
of being
much,
able
and
to
that's
say
just
that
evil.
He did
That's
it.
rotten.
Well, thankfully he didn't, because he doesn't deserve any satisfaction or praise. Just gross.
I hope he
In our
burns
number
in
9
hell.
spot, we have Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons is known for being a rocket scientist, but also a follower of the occultist Aleister Crowley. He is believed to be someone who was in direct contact with the devil and did experiments, aka spells, on himself. He was the reason for the advancement of liquid fuel and solid fuel rockets. He was unable to continue being a scientist when news of his occult ways became public knowledge. Apparently, he worked with the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, to summon the god Babylon to Earth. He died in an at-home explosion from an experiment that he was doing. Jack is a tricky one
Probably
because
making meth.
obviously everyone was so Christian and Catholic back then that they would have thought him to be evil, but I don't know. I really wonder if this is one of those cases where, they were wrong and maybe he was just a nice guy. I don't know. In our number 8 spot, we have Irving Wiseman. Irving Wiseman was working at Stanford University as a researcher when he was given permission to inject a mouse with human brain cells. They just wanted to see what would happen. They were instructed to stop the experiment once the human-like behaviors got to a specific point, like improved memory or problem solving, because then they'll have a pinky in the brain sitch, and the concept of that only sounds good in the cartoon world. I'm not ready for a mouse world takeover anytime soon. In our number 7 spot, we have Gordon Gallup and his team of scientists. Okay, so not saying Gordon Gallup is the evil scientist, but more that all of the scientists that consented to do this this in the first place may have been operating from an evil frequency. Or perhaps they were just doing what they were told because it's their job.
Probably.
Because let's be real, the real powerful people that make the decisions are the ones funding such projects as these. But since I have no idea who funded this, as that would probably take too much digging that I don't have time for, and it will probably just lead us to the US government, we're going to just call this spot Gordon Gallup and his team of scientists. Gordon Gallup was once one of the leading experts in evolutionary psychology, and he worked with a team of scientists in the 1920s on interbreeding humans with chimpanzees. He leaked to the press that they were actually successful. The experiment was conducted at the Orange Park Laboratory in Florida. Everyone proceeds to Google the financial backers there. This is where a female chimpanzee was inseminated with human. The animal not only became pregnant, but then proceeded to give birth to a living being, a human Z. But get this, they did not allow the human Z to live. After all of that, it was euthanized. What the heck, man? Potentially harmed this animal by impregnating it only to kill its baby cub. My inner future mama bear.
That's terrible. That's evil. That's freaking evil.
Spot, we have another group of scientists, the Belgian scientists. It really is so hard to name just one scientist responsible because it really does take a village to raise a child, and in this case, to create a mutant cow. Yes, a team of Belgian scientists started back in the 1800s to breed native cattle with short-horn cattle, and over time, they only selected the biggest and strongest, and eventually, that led them to creating the Belgian super cow, a ginormous cow that literally looks like it's on steroids.
Holy crap.
And I'm kinda afraid of it. I'm very
I'd be afraid of it.
It is unclear why these experiments were being done. I can only assume for more meat. So I guess we can't call these scientists evil per se without a justified reason, but hopefully they have a good one because otherwise, leave those cows alone. In our number 5 spot, we have Juan Carlos Belmonte. Juan is a biologist at the Salk Institute in California that has been working with other scientists and researchers in China on creating a human-animal chimera. Basically, a monkey embryo will be given human cells to create this. Now, before you get upset and say, what for? I think this may arguably be the best reason for doing this kind of experiment. The reason this is being done is to see if animals can possess organs such as livers and kidneys that are entirely human and can be used in the future as organs for transplants. As we do have a transplant shortage around the world, coming up with a solution to this is vital. Apparently, every 10 minutes, a new person is added to the waiting list for an organ transplant. So at this point, it is unclear as to whether the experiment has been completely successful, but I'm sure we'll know in the upcoming years. In our number 4...
You should actually reverse that and see if since we have such a shortage, see if the animals' organs will work in the human instead of the human's organs working in the animals. Maybe that's what they were saying they were doing. I didn't quite understand it. This is some crazy stuff.
First spot, we have Dr. Karl Klauberg. This guy is truly very evil. He was a doctor that would work in the infamous monstrous camps that I cannot name due to YouTube violation reasons, so please catch my drift.
Rhymes with Yahtzee.
Camps during World War II, specifically the Poland camp. Apparently, originally, he was interested in sterilizing all of the women of the camp, and eventually his interests expanded. He was allowed to experiment on thousands, but only 700 survived. He also artificially inseminated prisoners through a variety of methods and tormented his victims by claiming to have injected animal into their womb to create a monster. There are no reports that confirm this to be 100% true, as well as there are no reports of the after effects of this, so we have to conclude that this horrible, unconsented experiment was thankfully a failure. Just pure evil. In our number 3 spot, we have Hiromitsu Nagauchi. Hiromitsu is a scientist from Japan that is leading a team at the University of Tokyo. He and his team plans to grow human cells in mice and rat embryos and then transport them into surrogate animals, similar to work being done at Stanford University in the US. The goal is yet again to continue to see if animals can produce human organs that can later be transplants for humans. Up until recently, Japan was very strict as to how long the human cells in the embryos were allowed to be kept alive till. But recently the laws changed and they're allowed to be kept until the animal is brought to term. Whoa. This will help so much in terms of what they will be able to find through studying this process, but of course there are many ethical concerns around this experiment, such as once this new animal is brought to term, then won't it be a baby? Some claim that this is pure evil to then destroy this baby after.
It is.
But gosh,
they're pretty much playing God.
These experiments struggle with this, because I definitely would. In our number 2 spot, we have an unknown evil scientist that created the human sheep. In 2017, villagers of a small town in South Africa were frightened when a local sheep gave birth to a human sheep crossbreed. This is truly terrifying stuff that will haunt your dreams. Like, terrifying. It will definitely haunt mine. Imagine human sheep wandering the world. No thanks. Clearly this experiment was done by some evil scientist that decided, heck, I'm going to just let this happen and see how it unfolds. No one knows exactly how it was done, but most think the sheep was just artificially inseminated. The baby born was a stillborn, but if it had made it out alive, I bet you the world would have been on the hunt for the person responsible. In our number 1 spot, we have Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov. Known from his title, The Red Frankenstein, who was said to have been the creator of artificial insemination. His interest eventually turned into being interested in crossbreeding. In the 1920s, he traveled to Africa. After already successfully crossbreeding a zebra and a donkey, he now wanted to crossbreed a human and an ape. Apparently, after a while of living in Africa, he became desperate as his funds became increasingly low, that he then began to inseminate African women with chimpanzees without their knowledge. Holy, that's disgusting. Eventually, when people found out about what he was doing, he was shut down and his name was forever tarnished.
Should have been hung.
Yeah, I'm glad, because that's horrible.
Starting off our list at number 10, new bees. Great. Sick of the old ones that sting you in the neck and then you're allergic? We got some new bees now to worry about. Here we go. A lot of us know bees are pretty harmless and kind of cute, hairy little pollinators.
I don't find them
cute. Like I mentioned, you're allergic or terrified of them. But truthfully, bees normally do a lot more good than harm, obviously, right? Save the bees. That was, of course, until an experiment in the 70s went south. Yeah, this experiment resulted in a new bee, just a dangerous bee. The idea was to take a regular honeybee and breed it with a bee that is found in Africa that produces more honey. And of course the goal was to produce a manageable bee that would also be able to provide more honey than a regular honeybee.
All this is for money,
right?
all of it.
This sounds like a step in the right direction. Well, the bees that came out were a lot less manageable and they didn't even make more honey. Yeah, liars. You're fired, all 1,000 of you. Get out of here. After this experiment ended, however, the bees got out into the environment, and in the 80s, we saw the beginning of a massive trouble. These bees are not only aggressive towards other kind of bees, which creates a huge problem, but they're also very aggressive towards human beings. Nice. And when these guys sting, their stinger stays with them, so they can, you know, continue to Julius Caesar you how many times they want. The victims of these swarms receive 10 times the amount of stings as regular swarms, so horrible, horrible news. And they react to disturbances 10 times faster, and they will also chase said disturbance a quarter of a mile. So hope you can run really fast and really far.
In our number 9 spot, we have Paracelsus. Paracelsus is known for being a Swiss physician, scientist, and alchemist in the 1500s during the Renaissance. He didn't necessarily experiment with crossbreeding humans with animals, but he did experiment with making humans tiny and ginormous. Also, he was seemingly evil / insane, so I just wanted to put him on this list. Paracelsus was convinced he could grow giants and tiny humans by growing them from a jar of... Yep. Apparently, he would keep the jar in a warm place and feed the creatures blood to make them grow. I can just See him sprinkling in some blood into that jar. Apparently he was quite successful and managed to grow tiny humans, but allegedly the small creatures turned on him and ran away. Naturally.
Number 8, farm cattle. Back in the 90s, farmers in India were told that if they crossbred their cattle, they'd be able to breed cattle that could produce more milk, which in turn would mean more money for them and their families.
Yep.
Awesome. This should be amazing and great news, right? Well, considering why we're here watching, I don't think it's going to end the way we think, no. Different breeds of bulls were brought in and farmers were expecting great results, but they ended up being stuck with cattle that did produce more milk, great, but they also needed way more food. They needed high quality food as well, or else they'd stop producing more milk and they were less resistant to the local diseases, so they required more veterinary visits. So it cost them more money, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, we got more milk, but
It all
we have to spend more
evens
money
out.
on maintaining the damn thing. It's not a win. It's not a win in my book. Number 7, old Buffalo Jones. Here we go. A guy named Charles Buffalo Jones. Let's talk about him. This man started breeding animals in 1906 because the bison population in Arizona at the time was exceptionally low. So bison were bred with domestic cattle in order to produce a hardy commercial animal. Nice. Old Buffalo Jones getting his science on. He ended up just giving up on this and released the animals, who were then managed by the state, and the numbers remained relatively low because of limited hunting licenses. Well, when the beefalo, good name, found their way into a national park where hunting is banned and therefore aren't any, natural predators, the population began to grow by 50% a year. That's a lot of beefalo. So none of this is necessarily bad, but it's the animal's environmental impact that has the real trouble. First off, they're very thirsty animals and they can consume 10 gallons each per trip to a watering hole.
Wow.
So they're sucking it all up, you know what I mean? It's like when you're in school and you're waiting for water and the guy in front of you just keeps drinking. You're like, oh my God, what are you doing? Where is this going? Not to mention the fact that they do their dirty business in the water and that basically just ruins it all. Basically, they've thrown the entire ecosystem off balance and have pushed out other animals, and insects and plant life around have also been infected, all because they're thirsty and they like to take big shits where we all drink our water. Thanks, beefalo. Number 6, hybrid lion. Back in the 1980s, at the Chatbir Zoo in Chandigarh, India, they started an experimental program where they would breed together a domestic lion, which is a bit smaller, has a less shaggy mane. They would breed that with an African lion in the hopes that they could be introduced to the wild and help with the dwindling population of wild lions in India.
Okay.
Again, sounds like a great plan at first. How do we make it happen without making weird animals? The zoo found 2 African lions that were being used in a circus and then brought them in to breed with their other 2 Asiatic lions. Nice. Hey, we'll save ya. Just kidding, even worse. When the cubs were born, it was clear this was already a mistake, as the cubs all had severely weak back legs. They were all shaky. They were having extreme trouble walking, and as they got older, their immune system started to fail more and more. Sadly, by 2000, they had bred more than 70 of these hybrid lions, and they finally decided to stop the program, and all the males were given vasectomies in order to stop any reproduction further.
Again,
There's also laws that
playing
prohibited them
God.
from killing animals, so they were simply just waiting around for them to die naturally. It's kind of a weird circle we got into. When there's a dwindling population of lions, it's insane to me that they just wasted 20 years trying to do this when they could have just simply bred the lions that they had. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It was right there, and they're like, all right, now let's try something new. It's like, what? No, why? Number 5, Kunga. Perhaps the earliest example of human-animal hybrid testing. Here we go, halfway through. Time to turn it up a bit. Scientists recently learned about this donkey hybrid that roamed ancient Mesopotamia. Now, this was a time before even horses arrived, so they had to do something, right? Large kungas would pull wagons, and smaller ones would help pulling plows. These little guys,
That's
they were the
animal
talk
I've
the
never
town.
heard of.
Imagine hybrid animals before horses. No wonder they were a status symbol. 4,000 years ago, they were given as gifts for weddings. Yeah, yummy. I wonder what this one is. Smells a little stinky. After so long, scientists are finally able to figure out what exactly a kunga was a hybrid of. It was a female donkey and a male Syrian wild ass. Yeah, just a wild ass over there. Hey, nice wild ass. It's wild what you can still learn from ancient animal bones from even thousands of years ago. It's mind-blowing.
He's one of my
More
favorites
amazing how
on this
involved
channel.
This hybrid was in Mesopotamian culture. Do we bring back the kunga? I don't know. Number 4,
Nah.
super cow. Moo, but with a lot of O's. Just tons of a moo, just a mighty moo. Introducing the super cow. All right, start your day off with some super milk, and then have a super stomach ache and shit your super pants. Only in Belgium. Let's do it. Back in the 1800s, scientists
Yeah,
and farmer brought
we saw
together
this one
native
earlier.
cattle and short-horn cattle. After that, they would literally pick the biggest of the bunch and then have them breed together. These cows are officially called Belgian Blues, but I will continue to call them super cows. Thank you very much. I can't even look at these guys. They're disturbing. They look like bodybuilders.
Yeah,
That makes
I was
no
thinking
sense.
the
They have
same
like
thing.
8 biceps. The Incredible Hulk, just with more milk. Number 3, The mouse with an ear on its back. Oh, I want to Q-tip this guy every time I see him. The mouse with a human ear, folks. How did this happen? This is like the world's greatest mouse spy. Stuart Little's evil brother. Let's do it. Back in 1997, this Vacanti mouse became the test subject to determine if scientists could grow cartilage using chondrocytes, aka cells from a cow. And clearly it worked. A little too well. It's a little odd what we have. We're still talking about it, obviously. It's weird. It all started when Joseph Vacanti, a pediatric surgeon, began designing human organs. This was during a shortage in time. He wasn't just bored and started to make ears. He was changing the medical game. And little did he know, he was about to change the science game as well. He constructed an ear, and he told his brother Chuck and his partner Bob to not bring up the fact that he attached said ear to a live mouse. Kind of hard to bring up, but we'll do our best. Okay. Chuck failed. He spilled the beans almost right away. But now we know that cow cartilage can create human cells. That's great. I want to Q-tip his back. Is that weird? That's not weird. Gives ear
that
cheese
was
a
not
whole
quite
new
as
meaning.
bad as some of the others.
Number 2, the Zorfs. I'll give you a second to figure out what animal this is.
Zebra and a horse. There you go.
Male zebra, female horse. Now we've got a really fun word. Zebroids are also quite common historically. Charles Darwin even noted some in his work. So since the 19th century, crossbreeding zebras with horses and donkeys, it's all been done. More often than not, and this is what makes them stand out, zebroids will experience dwarfism. It's pretty cute. In 2010, a Zedonk was born.
That's
zebra donkey.
cute.
All these fun names, right? But again, back in the 70s, 3 were born in Colchester Zoo. These zookeepers were like, how do we make zoos new and hip and bizarre? Oh, I know. Humans are not great. Humans are too bored, it seems. And finally, number 1, Hiromitsu Nakauchi, stem cell biologist from Tokyo. This last one is too wild. Just recently, his experiments have been approved by the government, so things are actively in play here. Not old Farmer Joe in the early 1900s. No, we're getting to modern science now. Hiromitsu hopes to grow human cells inside mice and rats, right? Like we just
saw
talked
this
about.
one earlier.
But then he wants to transplant those embryos into surrogate animals. A lot of animals, a lot of cells, a lot of traffic going in and out. Cells into rats and mice embryos. How do we even get here? We went from Salem witch trials to rodents being genetically manipulated so they can make pancreases for you. What? But his hope here was that the rodents' bodies will be used for human cells to then make a pancreas for themselves. So it's kind of like a kickoff into biology, right? Here's the thing. While conducting said experiments, they found out that rats were starting to develop a human-type brain. Yeah, that's when they decided to pull the plug, rightfully so. The second humans and animals get too close, governments come in and they go, hey, stop.
No, we want to be in control. Thanks. Yeah. That's crazy. That second to the last one where he was talking about the horses, I remember when I was in middle school, they call it now, it was junior high when I was going, but I was probably 7th or 8th grade. We had some horses, and I had a little, had a Welsh pony, and we had a Shetland pony. And I used to ride them around in the backyard a little bit. It was kind of fun. I'm trying to think of their names. Blackie, I think, was the name of the Shetland pony. It was really small, and it was just totally black. And then we had the Welsh pony, and I think we called it Pokey, because it was really grumpy. It'll try and get you along the fence and try and rub you off on the fence. Didn't want anyone on him. But that was pretty cool. There's some weird people out there. I think they should just leave that stuff to God. And whatever happens, happens. That's my opinion. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought. And it's time for a joke. A woman in labor yells, "Shouldn't, wouldn't, couldn't, can't." The doctor says, "Oh, don't worry. Those are just contractions." Thank you, everybody. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hashtag Mean Gene, all that fun stuff. And if you like this video, tell all your friends, leave a comment down below. And if you didn't like it, then just shut up. And I will see you next time.